Imagine this for a moment. Every decision you made today, every opinion you defended, every feeling of confidence or doubt you experienced felt completely personal and intentional. It felt like you were in charge. But what if a large portion of those thoughts never actually came from conscious choice at all? What if they were quietly shaped by invisible mental forces that operate faster than awareness, faster than logic, and far faster than your sense of control? In this video, we are not going to simply list cognitive biases or explain them like definitions in a textbook. Instead, we are going to do something far more uncomfortable and far more useful. We are going to explore how these mental traps quietly sabotage intelligent people, distort judgment in real life, and keep otherwise capable individuals repeating the same mistakes while feeling completely rational the entire time. This guide is designed for people who already believe they think clearly, people who consider themselves logical, thoughtful, and independent, because paradoxically, those are often the people most vulnerable to cognitive traps. The goal here is not to make you paranoid about your thinking, but to help you recognize when your mind is working against your long-term goals instead of for them. You cannot remove these biases from your brain. They are not bugs. They are features of human cognition. But awareness changes the relationship you have with them. Awareness gives you the power to pause instead of react, to question instead of justify, and to choose growth over comfort. Much of what we understand about these mental shortcuts comes from decades of research in psychology and behavioral economics, including the work of Daniel Kahneman, who showed that the human mind operates using two very different systems. One is fast, automatic, emotional, and effortless. The other is slow, deliberate, analytical, and tiring. Most of the time, we believe the second system is in charge. In reality, the first one usually is. The biases we are about to explore live inside that fast system, quietly steering decisions before logic ever enters the room. Let us begin with one of the most powerful and most uncomfortable traps of all, cognitive dissonance. This is not simply a bias. It is a psychological survival mechanism. Cognitive dissonance occurs when you hold two conflicting beliefs about yourself or the world at the same time. That conflict creates mental discomfort, and the brain is highly motivated to reduce that discomfort as quickly as possible. But here is the crucial part. The brain does not resolve the conflict by seeking truth. It resolves it by protecting identity. When reality threatens how you see yourself, your brain will often rewrite reality instead. This is why people who fail at something rarely conclude that they lacked skill, preparation, or discipline. Instead, they conclude the goal was meaningless, the system was unfair, or success was corrupt anyway. This allows self-image to remain intact. The mind chooses emotional comfort over accuracy. Over time, this becomes dangerous because it blocks learning. Growth requires admitting error. Cognitive dissonance makes error feel like a threat. You see this clearly in money, relationships, and ambition. A person who believes rich people are immoral, but secretly wants wealth, experiences constant inner tension. That tension does not disappear on its own. It either turns into resentment or self-sabotage. The same happens in relationships when someone stays in an unhealthy situation while convincing themselves it is fine. Or in careers where people stay stagnant, while telling themselves advancement is not worth the stress. Cognitive dissonance does not make you lazy or dishonest. It makes you human. But if left unexamined, it slowly trains you to rationalize instead of improve. Another subtle but powerful trap is the spotlight effect. This bias convinces you that other people are paying far more attention to you than they actually are. You walk into a room feeling self-conscious. You make a small mistake and replay it in your mind for hours. You hesitate to take action because you imagine judgment waiting for you. In reality, most people are absorbed in their own internal narratives. They are worrying about how they appear, not how you do. The spotlight effect drains energy and confidence. It discourages experimentation. It keeps people from speaking, trying, and learning. Over time, it creates a false sense of risk around harmless actions. The irony is that the fear of being judged often causes more noticeable hesitation than the original mistake ever would have. When you recognize this bias, something liberating happens. You realize that most perceived judgment is self-generated. The mental spotlight is pointed inward, not outward. Now consider the anchoring effect, one of the most manipulable aspects of human judgment. Anchoring occurs when your mind relies too heavily on the first piece of information it encounters when making decisions. That initial number, opinion, or impression becomes a reference point, even if it is completely arbitrary. From that anchor, all subsequent judgments are adjusted, usually insufficiently. This is why pricing strategies work so well. A high initial price makes a lower one feel reasonable by comparison. A first impression frames how all future behavior is interpreted. Even experts are not immune. Judges, negotiators, doctors, and investors are all influenced by anchors, even when they believe they are being objective. The danger is not that anchors exist. The danger is forgetting that they are often meaningless. When you fail to set your own anchors, someone else will happily do it for you. Closely related to anchoring is the halo effect, which shows how easily our impressions of one trait spill over into unrelated judgments. When someone appears confident, attractive, or successful, we unconsciously attribute intelligence, honesty, and competence to them as well. The mind prefers coherent stories, so it fills in gaps with assumptions that feel consistent. This is efficient, but often inaccurate. The halo effect explains why first impressions last far longer than they should. It explains why reputations can protect people from scrutiny and why early praise can distort evaluations in schools and workplaces. Once a positive or negative halo forms, new information is filtered to support it. The mind defends the story it already believes. To think clearly, you must actively separate traits instead of allowing one characteristic to dominate your perception. Then, there is the gambler's fallacy, a trap that reveals how deeply we misunderstand randomness. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We expect balance, fairness, and correction. When we see streaks, we assume they must end. But independent events do not remember the past. A coin does not compensate for previous outcomes. Believing that it will creates false confidence and poor decisions. This fallacy extends far beyond gambling. It appears in decision fatigue, hiring, judging, and even self-evaluation. People believe they are due for success after a series of failures, or that luck must turn soon. While persistence matters, expecting balance where none exists can lead to reckless choices. Understanding randomness requires accepting uncertainty without narrative comfort. Another distortion of judgment comes from the contrast effect. Your evaluation of something is rarely absolute. It is relative to what surrounds it. A small improvement feels large when contrasted with something worse. A high price feels reasonable when compared to an even higher one. This is why environments shape satisfaction more than outcomes themselves. The contrast effect influences spending, relationships, and self-worth. You feel better or worse not because your situation changed, but because the reference point did. Social media amplifies this effect by constantly shifting comparison standards. Awareness of contrast does not eliminate it, but it helps you pause before letting context dictate value. Perhaps the most dangerous bias of all in the modern world is confirmation bias. This is the tendency to seek, interpret, and remember information that supports existing beliefs while ignoring or dismissing opposing evidence. Confirmation bias is comforting. It makes you feel intelligent and consistent. But it slowly narrows perception until your worldview becomes fragile and defensive. In an environment where algorithms feed you content aligned with your preferences, confirmation bias becomes self-reinforcing. Beliefs feel stronger not because they are correct, but because they are familiar. Repetition begins to replace truth. Disagreement feels like an attack instead of an opportunity to learn. Over time, this creates intellectual isolation. Reducing confirmation bias requires humility. It requires actively seeking perspectives that challenge you and tolerating the discomfort of uncertainty. The goal is not to abandon beliefs at random, but to test them honestly. Growth lives in that tension. Another fascinating phenomenon is the frequency illusion, often called the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. Once something enters your awareness, you start noticing it everywhere. This creates the illusion that it has suddenly become more common. In reality, your attention has simply shifted. The world did not change, your filter did. This illusion reveals an important truth about perception. You do not experience reality as it is. You experience the tiny fraction your brain deems relevant. This is both efficient and misleading. What you focus on expands in perceived importance. This is why mindset matters so deeply. Attention shapes experience. The Zeigarnik effect shows how unfinished tasks occupy mental space far more than completed ones. Open loops linger in memory, creating low-level stress and distraction. The brain wants closure. But interestingly, research shows that simply having a clear plan to complete a task can reduce this tension almost as effectively as completing it. This insight has practical value. Mental clarity does not require constant action. It requires intentional structure. When your mind knows what will happen next, it relaxes. When it does not, it ruminates. Finally, the paradox of choice reveals that more options do not always lead to better decisions. Beyond a certain point, increased choice creates anxiety, comparison, and regret. Instead of feeling empowered, people feel overwhelmed. They delay decisions or abandon them entirely. Satisfaction often comes from commitment, not optimization. When you choose from a limited set of options, you engage more fully and experience less regret. The pursuit of the perfect option often prevents meaningful action. All of these mental traps share a common theme. They are not signs of weakness or lack of intelligence. They are consequences of how the human brain evolved to survive, not to reason perfectly. The problem is not that these biases exist. The problem is living unaware of them. Clear thinking is not about eliminating error. It is about noticing when comfort replaces truth, when speed replaces accuracy, and when familiarity replaces understanding. The most dangerous mistakes are the ones that feel obviously right. The more you learn to observe your thinking instead of defending it, the more freedom you gain. Not freedom from bias, but freedom from being unconsciously controlled by it. And in a world that constantly competes for your attention, beliefs, and decisions, that awareness may be one of the most valuable skills you can develop.